And I call on Maggie Chapman to open the debate.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to be able to lead this debate this evening. I'd like to thank all those members who have supported the motion to enable us to talk about this now, and I pay tribute to the third sector organisations, especially the Stop Climate Chaos Scotland Coalition, Christian Aid and SCIAF, who have done so much painstaking work on this vital issue. Climate devastation is here. After the raging tempest of the past week, no one in Scotland, especially in the North East, can be in any real doubt. I hold in my heart all who have suffered in their homes, their families, their communities and livelihoods, and most especially the families and friends of those who lost their lives in such sad circumstances. Everyone, everywhere, is affected by the impacts of climate change. For a fortunate few so far, these may seem little more than inconveniences. That is the deadly gamble that Rishi Sunak and his Westminster government are throwing the dice for. The cynical hope that voters will be incapable of looking out of their own windows to see the storms on the horizon. I don't believe it will work in England, and I know it will not work in Scotland. For we face not only more extreme weather events like Storm Babette, with all the destruction that they bring, but also slower and quieter assaults. Coastal erosion, threatening to displace whole communities, decimated harvests, degraded soils, wildfires and floods, disease, loss of home and habitat, extinction of keystone and beloved species. It is unthinkably painful, even for us here and now, with all of our accumulated privilege and defence. For the next generations, it will be harder still. And for billions of our fellow humans across the world, the blow falls now, heavy and relentless. In the majority world, the Global South, climate devastation is for many a daily reality, lived in bodies and homes, in year after year of disrupted seasons, rains that come late or not at all, or come too hard, washing away the frail shoots of hope. In year after year of lost harvests, lost water resources, lost livelihoods, lost children. This is not bad luck, poor planning, or insufficient resilience. This is injustice, as brutal as it gets. The people bearing the heaviest burden of climate chaos are, almost universally, those least responsible for its reality. However you calculate emissions, theirs are minute, scarcely visible on the charts. Far from benefiting from the fossil economy and the capitalism it supports, they have borne the curse of extractivism, exploitation of resources, environment and labour. Colonial and post-colonial oppressions have forced them to use precious land for export crops, denied them the kind of economy that can brazenly outsource its emissions, and callously suppressed Indigenous people whose knowledge of and care for non-human nature we need now more than ever. Our response to this gravest of crises must be wide and it must be deep. It must acknowledge that many ways in which decision-makers of Scotland and the UK have been complicit in colonialism and climate injustice. It must impel us to rapid emissions reduction, to urgent decarbonisation, and to global cooperation on both mitigation and adaptation. But it requires more. Escalating emissions have led to climate impacts that it is now too late to prevent or adapt to. They can only be addressed by compensation, by reparations, by the provision of resources by those most responsible. And that is what we mean by loss and damage. They include harms that are tangible and intangible, economic and non-economic, caused by rapid or slow onset events. Scotland has played an important role in amplifying the issue of loss and damage, not least in its symbolic and real commitment at COP26. I pay tribute to Nicola Sturgeon for her leadership in that. Thank you. It helped to bring about the decision at last year's COP to establish an international loss and damage solidarity fund. But now, urgently, we need to do more. That global loss and damage fund exists only as an idea, really. Many of us hoped that at this year's COP, in just a few weeks' time, that idea would become operational, following the work of the transnational committee that was working on this issue over the last year, and of which the UK is a member. But I am angry and bitterly disappointed that just last weekend, at the last of 4 meetings of this transnational committee, they failed to draft the recommendations on the operationalisation of the Global Loss and Damage Fund. There will now be an extra meeting in November where I hope the EU and US will listen to the alliance of small island states and other developing countries and not impose the World Bank's business model on them or this fund. AOSIS are clear. That model does not work for them. Again, the developed countries are trying to control and determine other people's futures. Developing countries are also clear on who should be eligible for the fund. All developing countries. Again, the Global North want to restrict eligibility. There are several other points of disagreement between developed and developing countries, but the fund must be governed robustly, with effective resources that meets the need of compensation and the weight of financial contribution resting squarely on the shoulders of those most responsible.